This guitar has a lot to live up to. Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today we're going to document the Epiphone Korina Flying V that just recently came out as part of Epiphone's Inspired by Gibson Custom Shop run, which consists of a 59 LP, an early SG, and the Korina Explorer that we documented a couple of weeks ago. That Explorer was fantastic. When I first unboxed it, I was like, yeah, okay, it's about what I expected, but then I plugged it in and was in awe of how awesome it felt, how raw it sounded. It was at that point when I knew I had to try this Flying V. And thankfully, a viewer of the show decided to do a new Guitar Day purchase, so I get to document his guitar before he gets it. If you're interested in doing something similar, you can find out more information on my website, troglysguitarshow.com. All right, so far so good. We've got that historic style case that has the Epiphone Inspired by Gibson custom logo on it, just like last time. And it is the correct wedge shape that the Flying V's got, so it's a little bit different than that Explorer case that we had. I wouldn't have blamed them had they used the same case and just used different interiors on them. But I did notice this whole thing is a little bit lighter than that Explorer, so I actually really like that. But let's go ahead and see. Is it just as good as that Explorer? Wow. I would almost say it looks a little bit better. I love that chevron wood grain that we've got going on here. How it kind of meets up here in an upside down V shape on both sides. That's looking good. We've got the giant bright pink interior, just like that last one. And then up here we get a silver Epiphone badge instead of the gold one that the Gibson's got. But straight out of the case, wow, this thing is light. In fact, I almost think the neck is going to be heavier than the body. And so far, I really like the ambered hue of this Korina body that they've got going on here. But to fully appreciate what the 58 Flying V is, let's do a little bit of Flying V history. So this futuristic guitar was first introduced around 1958. It was way too crazy and shortly discontinued after that. However, that didn't stop Albert King from picking one of these things up and rocking it blues style. After its discontinuation, the Flying V did come back in 1967, so that's nearly 10 years earlier than the Explorer story that we talked about in last week's episode. But instead of the Korina and wide shoulder, they were made out of mahogany and kind of had a slight redesign. They were no longer a string-through style either. Many times they would have some sort of a vibrola on them. But those late 60s Flying Vs are very expensive on the used market today, mainly because Hendrix made them pretty popular. However, in the 70s, they start to slowly get made over into something new. Most times you'd have a stop bar tailpiece, they would still be made out of mahogany. There were even some limited edition ones in the early 70s, such as the 1971 Medallion Flying V, as made famous by K.K. Downing of Judas Priest. And throughout the 70s, they stay pretty consistent on the way they look. It's just the headstock starts to change. But in 1979, you have the introduction of the Flying V2, which is a maple walnut or walnut maple constructed guitar that's a multi-layer with weird boomerang pickups that sound like single coils. Those didn't last too long. But then in the 80s, you still have the regular mahogany ones. You have the introduction of the Heritage series, which is the first time Gibson brought back the 58 style Korina bodies. And in 83, you get the introduction of the shred metal alder body Flying Vs. And there are slightly fancier cousins within the Designer series. But the 90s through the 2000s, you basically just saw the 67 style outside of a few limited edition custom shop runs, because the custom shop first starts to produce Flying Vs in 2001. Check out this interesting 67 style Korina bodied Flying V that we documented about a month ago. And then in 2002, we have the introduction of the faded Flying Vs. So needless to say, there's been a whole lot of different Flying V styles, but the true 58 style has always been expensive regardless of whenever it's been produced. That's why people are really excited for these new Epiphones. They've got the limited edition case, they have the solid Korina construction, they have the Gibson USA electronics and pickups. I love the fact that we have the little doofy rubber bumper over here. Even if it's not all that useful, it's supposed to be, so it makes it so it doesn't slide on you as much. But this is not the proper way to hold a Flying V when you're sitting. You gotta straddle it classical style. So if somebody ever tells you it's not comfortable to sit down with a Flying V, you're just holding it wrong. They're actually one of the more comfortable guitars to sit with. So far, the only downside to these guitars appears to be the Indian Laurel fretboard. Some guys don't necessarily like that. They would have rather have had rosewood. I'm kind of in that same boat, but at least the Laurel boards on these so far have looked pretty good, and the fretwork appears to be very good. I mean, look how shiny those are just straight out of the box. And then some guys don't like the scarf joint, but we'll talk a little bit more about that on the workbench. They might seem really expensive for an Epiphone at $1,300, but once you strip out the premium price for all the things that we just talked about, it's really not that much different than some dealer exclusives or other limited edition non-solid Korina body runs in the past. But you can get these in both white and black guard versions. That's just your choice. And as far as case candy, you don't get much, but they gave you so much other stuff. Do you really need some stuff that just only sits in your case? I'll leave that up to you. So I know this all kind of sounds like an advertisement, but that last Korina Explorer really pumped me up. So let's throw it on the workbench, see if the Flying V is just as good, or does it not live up to the hype? Let's find out. All right, let's dig in. We're 2 for 2, they're not lying. We've got a Burstbucker 2 in the neck and a Burstbucker 3 in the bridge. Now, if you wanted the exact pickup that's in the $10,000 custom shop Korina one, you would technically have to buy some custom buckers and swap these out. But custom buckers and Burstbuckers, they're perfectly fine pickups. As far as our neck pickup cavity, you can see your channel routes, as well as your long neck tenon that goes all the way here to the body. The pickguard just covers it up just like we saw on that Explorer. And we do have a little bit of flaking of the wood right here, but nothing too crazy. Within our bridge pickup cavity, we can see our QR code, as well as our serial number and our model identification, and some markings along the edges. So apparently the older Korina Epiphones were just Korina veneers and not actually solid Korina. So that is a spec on these. It is 100% solid Korina. You can definitely see it on this example because you can see the continuation of the wood grain. It's a really nice center seam, 2-piece body. Now this is kind of interesting. The studs for the ABR1 look like conversion posts, because instead of just being drilled directly into the top, it actually still has a stud within the body. But it pulls off the look of being an ABR1 on a budget. Here's our cool string through tailpiece. It's all gold, just like the rest of the hardware. And now as far as our wiring, I'm gonna be honest, that wiring job does not look very good. Looks like it's gonna do the job, but definitely not quite custom shop quality. But there you can see our capacitor on the tone. These guys are your volumes. They are indeed CTS 500K pots. You've got our 3-way toggle switch over there. And the output jack is on its own separate plate over here. Oh fudge, I told you guys that solder job wasn't very good. Yes, in general, I would not suggest taking one of these things apart just to look at it for fun, because all the wiring is like cut very short, and if you don't have the proper amount underneath the pickup, it makes it hard for the pick guard to go back down, but I've got it all set back up. I'm not really gonna fault Epiphone for that. The finish on these, it feels like a satin finish, but yet it still has some of the qualities of a gloss. So if you're expecting a full-on shiny gloss, that's not what this is. It's actually really comfortable to play, but it does have that certain Epiphone-like quality to it, but that's not necessarily a bad thing in this case. It kind of helps hide fingerprints a little bit, but at the same time, it will also show them in a different way. I actually find the coloring a little bit more appealing on this particular Flying V over the Explorer we did. But that pretty much covers it for the body. Now we move on to our Korina neck with the Indian Laurel fretboard. Now when I conditioned it, this is how it came off. This is a brand new guitar, so I'm betting that they're actually dyeing the Laurel fretboards. That way they look a little bit darker and closer to rosewood, and honestly, I'm okay with that. I think we'd be surprised how many fretboards are actually dyed in production. But we've got our acrylic dot inlays all up the fretboard, 22 medium jumbo style frets, with a 24 3/4 inch scale length, with a 12-inch fretboard radius, matched with about 11-degree headstock pitch, and a pretty shallow 2-degree neck angle. And this angle gauge that I've been using has a magnet on the bottom, and I've noticed that Epiphone fret wire is magnetic, whereas Gibson isn't, so they're definitely made of different materials. But now what you're really here for, 1.7-inch nut width, that increases to 2.1 by the 12th, with a 0.89 first fret neck depth, and that increases to 1.05 by the 12th. To further illustrate that, here it is on the contour gauge, 1st fret and 12th fret. So this is just like the Explorer. It starts out more of a D shape, but don't let that scare you. That is literally just for the first 3 frets. There's just a flatness to the neck. Then it transitions into a full C, and it just continues to get bigger by the 12th. So for the most part, it's a C-shaped neck profile once you get out of your cowboy cord area. But now onto our headstock, we can see our silver Epiphone badge, and our truss rod's in there if we need to use it. And interestingly enough, the cover itself is black, which is how it's always been. But being the white guard version, I think a white truss rod cover, although not historic, might be interesting. Moving on to the back, I just love this example. I've seen a few of them like this, so don't think this is particularly rare. I think you could find one if you did enough shopping around. But you can see your string through ferrules right here. One of your strap buttons is located over here. The other one in kind of a strange position, right on your shoulder instead of back here. You might look at this and go, wow, why is there so many pieces making up this area? Well, to be correct, Korina V's, the body does extend over top of the neck right here. So you can pretty easily see where the neck ends and the body begins. And then in the Explorer video, I had some people fighting me that this is not a one-piece neck. I would honestly say, yes, it is a one-piece neck because the scarf join does not happen until the headstock. The headstock is technically different from the neck because normally we say like a 5-piece neck or a 3-piece neck in Gibson territory. And that never includes the headstock wings that Gibsons have. So in my opinion, yes, it is a one-piece neck, but the headstock is 2 pieces. Because a lot of scarf joins come down like right here. There's a circular shape, like check out a Marauder for that. But this one's really interesting how they've done it. If you actually look on the sides of this, you can see it comes in at an angle where they join it. So most of the neck is like one big piece, and they have this long shelf right here that they glue this other piece of the headstock onto. The same thing is true over here on the base side. And it also joins at a little bit of an angle rather than straight across. But there you can see the new logo. It's so big they had to move the stickers down here. And you do feel them when you play, so you might want to take those off. But moving on, we've got our gold Epiphone Clusen style tuners, and we have our serial number up here. And wow, just a ½ ounce over 6.5 pounds. That is a really good weight for a big Flying V like this. So far, I'm actually really impressed with this. Maybe even more so than the Explorer, but I think it's because I kind of knew what to expect this time, so some of the weird things didn't necessarily throw me off. But let's go ahead and plug this one in and hear how it sounds. Sounds just as good as that Explorer, if anything. I love that middle position, though. And the bridge is almost too hot for clean tones. You could always lower the bridge pickup or lower your volume. So obviously it cleans up like almost too well. Alright, let's kick on the dirt. Now that we know all about the new Epiphone inspired by Gibson custom shop Flying V, what are my final thoughts on this thing? It's every bit as good as that Explorer. Are they expensive for what they are? Yeah, but I really do think they're worth it if this is what you want. Sure, the same amount of money can buy you a used Gibson Les Paul Studio, but then you've got a Les Paul Studio, not a Korina Flying V. So it really just comes down to, what are you really looking for? If you're looking for one of the best Epiphone Flying Vs or Explorers, these really did blow me away. Like, I wasn't even expecting to like the Flying V that much. But after my experience with that Explorer, I just had to try it, and I'm very glad I did. I like this a lot. So I would suggest trying one at a store if these specs sound interesting to you. The only thing I don't really like comes down to vintage accuracy, strap button locations. It's not crazy neck dive, but it still wants to fall a little bit, so you have to slightly support it on a strap. And I'm pretty sure moving that strap button to back here would solve any of those issues. That's really the only thing negative I can say. The frets feel great. The finish, while not exactly what I thought it was going to be at first, actually feels pretty good to play. And the neck is not so overly chunky on this one that it would scare people away from trying it. Alright, troglodytes, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next review and demo. Take care. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, consider subscribing. I post videos like this every day. And you might even enjoy this next one.